I'm joined here by Mercedes Bryce Morgan, the director of Bone Lake. Mercedes, thank you for joining us, and welcome to the opening night of the fifth annual Northeast International Film Festival. How does it feel having this film be the opening film for this festival this year?
Yeah, it feels so incredibly special. Like just to be an opening film is just, it's a cool dream as a filmmaker, and to be able to have people watch it in all different places of the world is just super awesome.
That's great. Well, and congratulations on that. It's fantastic. Yeah, it's a fantastic achievement to have that, and it's a great film as well. I guess I want to start just at the very beginning of the film's kind of journey in terms of when you were brought onto this. So the script was written by Joshua Friedlander.
Yes.
I was wondering if you could just talk a little bit about how that script, found its way to you and what your impressions of the script were and what it was that like drew you to the story and made you want to, to tell that story in a visual way, please.
Yeah, for sure. So that script, it was sent to me by my agents, and I think they thought, okay, here's something that's subversive and it's erotic, it's sexual, and then it kind of goes into the horror and it explodes. And so I thought, okay, great. You guys read me right. That is exactly my type of movie. And when I read it, what really attracted me to it is the fact that even though this movie is funny and it's campy, having these character dynamics that really build up and slow burn us into the horrors, that way when things go down, we care more, is something that was really attractive to me.
Hmm. Yeah, I think one of the things about the film as well is it takes certain elements of setup, which are quite possibly very familiar to people who've watched maybe a lot of horror films, but it does something with them in an interesting way that kind of pulls the rug out from under the audience's feet and kind of seems to relish on making the audience maybe feel a bit uncomfortable. The opening scene in particular, which I'm sure you probably get a lot of questions about and has been talked about a lot, like that to me, it opens up with, like I say, a setup that a lot of, especially slasher films, might open with people running through the woods, but instantly you're just automatically taken aback by, oh, it's naked people. That's not necessarily what I was expecting. And then it
Yes.
goes on and climaxes, for lack of a better term, and in this really just visceral, wince-inducing scene. I was wondering if you could talk a bit about the choice to open the film in such a way that does set the tone and lets the audience kind of know that what they're in for, or at least to make lets the audience know not to necessarily get comfortable with what you might
Yeah.
expect. Was that in the script already? Was that something that was kind
No.
of added, or?
Yeah, so that was something that actually wasn't in the script, and we decided to put it in because we wanted to let people know they could trust us of where the movie was going. Like we wanted to give them just a little taste of that, and so that's something that I came up with the concept with the producers, and I went ahead and wrote it, and it's just extra special to be able to go, what if we had the arrow go through his balls? And the producers are like, we love that idea. That's a great idea. And I go, okay, cool. I'm working with the right people.
That's fantastic. Yeah, it's such like a very raw, kinetic opening to a film, and it really just it sets the tone in a great way, I feel. Again, the film itself, it sometimes feels like it relishes making the audience like feel uncomfortable, that scene in particular, but also even just the more like sort of subdued scenes of like Diego go having to rummage through the luggage, for sin and all that. Like, how much fun did you have constructing those moments like on set and in the edit, knowing that you were, trying to kind of make the audience sort of maybe squirm in their seats a bit or to not be comfortable?
Yeah, totally. I love watching movies that make me uncomfortable, and I think especially people who are fans of this space also like that. And so I think a big part of this is having that tension of, oh, this feels a little wrong. Oh no, their toes are being stepped on. When is this going to go down? And kind of just, for lack of a better word, edging people until we get to our climax is something that it did. It was on set looking at how that was, but then also in the edit. I'm a big fan of test screenings. And so I wanted to see how are people reacting at what point and how can we further sculpt this with that.
Mm. Was there anything in the test screenings that changed dramatically in terms of what the audience were perceiving or weren't perceiving, and how that kind of made its way into the final cut at all?
Yeah, I mean, I think, like for example, with our character Diego, who's played by Marco Pagosi, people really wanted him to have a moment at the end, and so that's something that we kind of brought into at the final moment in the boat. He really gets to like let her have it for the final time, and that's something that we saw. Okay, this is something people wanted, and we were able to satisfy people more that way.
Okay, cool. Yeah. Um, I mean, again, it's a film that's incredibly sexually charged. We can't have a conversation about this film without talking about the sort of the
Yes.
sexuality and the eroticism on the screen, but also, I guess, how that fits in more to like the broader kind of climate of cinema. At the minute, there's
Yeah.
like a real lack of that sort of thing around, even in mainstream film and also in more independent kind of spaces of cinema. Why, like, first of all, do you have any thoughts on why that might be? And was that something that you were, conscious of when making the film? Did you feel like you were kind of making a bit of a statement by putting this film out like that, or?
Yeah, I mean, I think I grew up on all of these 90s erotic thrillers, and even when I was younger, I watched erotic movies even before I watched horror movies because I grew up in a very sex positive household. And so to be able to combine those is great. But I think, I've gotten asked the question of, we don't see sex in movies anymore. Do you think you're making a big splash by this? And I think if anything, that just means that we should have more erotic movies. And the fact that there's so few of them, I go, let's bring sex back into the movies. But I think a big difference now with something like this versus erotic movies of the past is you look at all these 90s erotic thrillers and the women are almost looked at as deviant and dangerous for being sexual. And I wanted to show something where our protagonist, she's not feeling satisfied. And instead of that being deviant of her, that's just part of her being a human and wanting to have that connection. And that's just part of her biology and seeing how all of our characters are sexual creatures, but there's a right way to do it and there's a wrong way to do it. But also, sex is fun. So why not combine it? If we're showing violence on screen, I think let's show sex. And, it's really hard to guess why that's happening, but I think that with politics and with fashion, we kind of have 180s all the time. So I think maybe that us feeling like we're in that space where we don't have a lot of sex is just because people reacting to go, oh, we did that too much. Okay, reel it back in. So I think that even though we're maybe in that current place, the people who are looking for this, like, I just want our fan base to find this movie even more. And I think the people have been looking for that because there hasn't been as much of it. We'll just appreciate it more, is my hope.
Yeah, I think it's a great point you make about in the past, women being seen as like deviant for just having, like a basic sexual desire. And I think the film really deals with that aspect of it in a great way, where Sage points up the kind of double standard when she asks Diego if he masturbates or not. And that line
Yeah,
for me, where she just brings that kind of just lays it straight up, right there. It's like it just kind of brings that aspect to the forefront. It's like they should both have the same. They
exactly.
should be seen the same, in that regard about being able to
Yeah.
seek pleasure and pleasure themselves.
Totally. And I think on that too, it's like Diego's not trying to be a bad partner. Like he very much so he wants to pleasure his partner because he loves her so much. But they're just not having the right conversations and he hasn't arced enough yet at that point to be able to do so. But like for me, it's having just especially him as a male character of someone who like really wants to do well and like he is like he's very loving, but he just needs to go on a journey and like discover that for himself. Like to me, that's very hopeful and like I love seeing male characters like that.
Mm. Yeah. So sex and violence, both in terms of the concepts or the themes that are in this film, but also the song. At what point did that song by The Exploited get brought into the kind of creative process? Because it works so well and it's just so in your face, and it's just this is what the film is about in such a great way. I was just wondering if you could talk a little bit about that, if that's okay.
Yeah, yeah. So that song is something that I always was excited about. And then when we were able to get the rights to it, I went, yes. But for me, it was really important because this movie, it's not meant to be serious and it's very comedic. And to be able to put a song like that, I wanted to let people know, like, this is the type of movie, like, we're allowed to laugh at this. It's a silly movie.
Yeah. Did you have any other like backups for the song at all, or was the scene going to
We
go in a
didn't. That
different
was
way?
my
Or
first choice, and we got my first choice.
that's such a risky kind of gambit to have.
Oh,
That's incredible. Yeah.
I know. Yes.
And also, I guess in terms of sex and violence, what can you talk a bit about kind of shooting both of those different kind of sides of the movie, I guess, because they're both
Yeah.
very inherently visual kind of ideas to present on camera. Can you
Yeah.
maybe talk about the challenges of shooting both sex and violence in terms of, like either effects or intimacy coordination and anything like that, and what was hardest to do maybe as well?
Yeah, so in a funny way, the way that I describe shooting sex scenes and fight scenes are very similar. And I like to kind of approach them the same way because I think that sex scenes should be approached the same way that you're choreographing a dance or same way that you're choreographing a fight. Like it's not real sex, it's simulated. And so we have a coordinator there to help us of what is the duration of this? How are they moving their bodies in a way that feels realistic, even though we're not doing this? And so I think it's something that if people, there's a lot of emotions that go into it, but if it's treated in a way where we're not doing anything weird, we're just doing another scene, and this is another scene where no one's actually being dying and hit, no one's actually having sex, and I think I want to try and provide that comfortable environment. But I think, with that too, it's still at the end of the day, we're at indie movie. So every scene to get in our amount of time is hard and it just takes a lot of planning. And so just the entire process of this movie was just intense. Like there was never a moment on set because initially we had 18 days to shoot. And so, which is crazy. And so it was just so much every moment of the day. I'm like, we can use this moment to get this shot. Like, I'm gonna fight for another take. Like, oh my God, they're letting me, we have a crane going down through the house and twirling around. Because for me, I love movies that are visual. And so I wanted to protect that, even though we had a tight schedule.
Yeah. I mean, that shows certainly with some of the camera, the shot choices that you've used. There's some great, like really um like point of view kind of shots in the camera of, if like the montage where they're sweeping and cleaning, for example, or the bit where they're breaking into the doors, where you see it from the lock, like the perspective of the lock, almost, and the camera sort of tilts every
Yes.
time, which is just a really great like moment. What just on a purely technical kind of nerdy level, how was that particular shot achieved?
Yeah, for sure. So that shot was achieved. We actually, in a very simple way, but we put the tripod on its side. So that way, when the actor hit, we built like a little block on the side of the camera. When he hit the side of the camera, the DP just went like this with the tripod mirroring it. But that's one of people's favorite shots. It's my favorite shot.
Yeah, it's great. It
Because there's
really
a
is
boring
good.
way to shoot it. And we're like, nah, let's do it this fun way.
Also just the location. I was just wondering if you could talk a little bit about the location that property, because for the film to kind of work, and for I think for one of the, it needs, that location needs to say something. It needs to be something where they'd want to obviously visit, something where they might feel like they don't want to leave when they realize they've been double booked. It has to kind of play into all of that. What was the process of like securing that location, knowing that the majority of the film takes place,
Yeah.
in that place?
No, it's a huge decision. I feel like we scouted almost every location, every house that was next to a lake in Georgia. And I chose that location because, there's the cabin version of this, but I wanted something that felt, like you said, like we want to go here and this feels so romantic. But beyond that, there's also just this amazing symmetry to the house where I went, oh, I can just shoot this in multiple ways and just have like the house symmetry speak for itself. But also the way the rooms connect to each other. I'm like, you can run down this corridor and not realize someone's chasing you to come out around. So things like that, or seeing, there's a window that goes to a staircase down below so I can drop a crane down. Beyond that, too, the three doors are a set that was built into the house by our production designer because no house would have three perfect doors for three rooms just waiting. That would be crazy. And so it was like taking something that would exist and then supplementing it with what we brought into it.
Okay, cool. Yeah, no, that's great. Yeah, I was going to ask about that. Like, was there already a sex dungeon in the location, or was it? But no.
Now we were like, we could only shoot in this location if there's a sex dungeon. We had to see 1,000 houses. No, we brought that in.
And I guess I just want to sort of move on to things talking about the performances or the actors. It's a film with four main characters in it. So much of the film is hanging on their performances, the way they interact, the believability of like the nuance of their relationships. The whole film really needs that to be successful, I think, which it does. But that's all in the performances. What was the process for casting? Was it just like a self-tape thing, or were these people that you'd had on your radar before for anything, or?
Yeah. So these are people that either myself or the producers have worked with before. And so Maddie was in my first movie. So I knew, okay, she's someone she's never done a bad take and she just has a groundedness to her where even though it's absurd, like you just believe her. And then for Marco Pagosi and Alex Rowe. They're people that the producers I've worked with before. And then Andra is a very fresh face who a fellow director friend of mine had worked with her. But I wanted someone who was just down. Like, it's a very intense, spicy role. And so we need to have someone who is just committed. And especially because we're doing so much nudity and intimacy scenes, it was just knowing that people could trust us of like what kind of movie that we're making was really important.
Yeah, I was going to say, yeah, they need to be somebody that's obviously comfortable doing what they're doing, but they also need to
Yes.
be able to have that trust and faith in you, in order to
Yeah.
make, to make sure that you're, making the film
Yeah.
the way that you're saying you are, I guess. So,
Exactly. Yeah.
were there any like challenges with shooting on this level of like a budget, like a lower, obviously, maybe on a lower end of the budget, given you said obviously 18 days, but was there anything
Yeah.
else that was like a big challenge for you generally, do you think, or?
Totally. I mean, I think that the challenge is just doing a lot in a little bit of time. But, I had really strong producers behind me where we were able to put money towards the prosthetics. Because for me, I'm like, I want to do it with prosthetics and I want to have it look right. Because, for anyone who's a horror fan, if you watch a horror movie and you get to that point of the kill and it looks fake, it just kind of takes you out a little bit. And you're like, okay. But if it looks real, it's pretty horrifying. And my favorite thing is when people watch it and they have to cover their eyes. I'm like, that means it's feeling real. It's feeling good. And so, yeah, I mean, that was challenging, but just like we had other production challenges where the last day where we shot on the lake, with the storm, there was a real storm. And so we couldn't shoot because we had 2 feet of water come up and we dropped a lens off the boat and the stunt coordinator slipped and broke his finger. And we're like, okay, shut it down. We need to go back and like shoot this on a soundstage. So just like normal things that productions deal with that are hard. It was hard. Yeah.
Um, and I guess just in terms of like wrapping this up, what is it that can you talk about what you kind of have next? Do you have any, obviously I'm aware you might not be able to go into much detail, but
Yeah.
do you have anything that you can talk about what your next thing is? Are you prepping something already
Yeah.
or?
Yeah, I'm currently in prep. I go and I fly out next week to continue on location. I can't speak about that too much, but we have a very exciting poppy cast behind it. And this one, it will still be comedic, but it will be a surrealist dramedy. And then after that, I have another horror comedy coming up because I just love things that are lifted and intense. I'm not a subtle person. And so, if you haven't noticed. And so I'm excited to just do more things in that vein of continuing horror, but also exploring more because there's so many wonderful genres.
Oh, excellent. Well, yeah, Melissa, thank you so much for joining us for this now, Mercedes. And again, it's been great to have the
Cool.
film screen as the opening film of the festival.
No, thank you. I'm
Um,
I'm so honored to be a part of the festival, and thank you for the wonderful Q&A.
no, no worries. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Yes. Awesome.
Bye.
Thanks, Paul. Bye.